Well, I'm meeting today with the composer Marie-Claire Saindon, and we're really excited to be working on your music in Camerata this fall, Marie-Claire. On November 16, we'll be performing your song La Fille Matelot, which you actually wrote for the Halifax Camerata Singers several years back. But it's so great to see you again. We've been introduced at a couple different conferences, and it's great to spend this time with you. I wonder, Marie Claire, would you just sort of tell us a bit about yourself? Our audience members, many of them will be familiar with some of your music, but tell us a bit about music that you love to compose and sort of what other things you do as an artist.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. This is great because I wrote La Fille Metro in 2016, I think. So it's been a while. It was even before my first mouth reel that I've written, Sur le Taquet in Montréal, which we'll get to later. But that it's nice to revisit it and just check out what brought me to that piece and what I really loved about it. So, in essence, I do a lot of folk music. I've done a lot of folk music, so for me, it's really natural to go back and have some trad or some Celtic-y kind of stuff. And what was difficult is, so I studied in contemporary composition at McGill, and that world definitely looks for like research based and very push and avant garde kind of music. And here I was, little daydreaming, happy go lucky, I love melodies and harmony kid, being like, I'll learn what I have to learn at McGill, and then I'll take that and then apply to film music, which I really want to do. And then I just went through the McGill program and thought, oh boy, I was not ready for this. And one comment that was told to me once was, stop bringing in the Celtic stuff. Just don't, it's overdone. Don't do it no more. The context was for film music at that point in time. And it's true, it's done a lot, but I couldn't help but having that in over my shoulders. So
Yeah.
La Feuille Matelot was the first piece that I was actually asked um, to actually bring in some trad stuff. Jeff Judery, who was the conductor at the time of Camerata, asked, "Can you do something that's very specifically Acadian, French Acadian? What can you bring that's part of that tradition?" So yeah, I grew up in a very with a singer songwriter mom, so I sang a lot with her. So that's a lot of part of my background: fiddling, singer songwriter, violinist in a school orchestra where we love to do very melodic things. Crazy McGill studies, tried to be a film composer, and then came back to choir and went, "Oh, this is great!" So that's my background.
Yay! That's terrific. And do you have anything, not to put you on the spot, maybe it's top secret. Do you have any projects on the go right now or anything that you're excited about that you want to share?
I have a really exciting project for my third year of my residency with Corleone out in Vancouver. So the men's choir Corleone. I'm composing residence for them with them for 3 years. I just started my first year, but we're planning the next few years, and it's a bit top secret, but it does involve some folk musicians from here in Montreal, and if everything goes well, and I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a large work again if everything goes well, and I think that's all I'm going to say for now. But I'm pretty pumped about
That's
that.
that's really exciting. Thank you for sharing, and we'll be absolutely eager to keep track of how that goes. Having been on the West Coast for about 10 years, I mean, certainly Corleone, I knew Diane Loomer and am a big fan of the work Corleone continues to do, but their work with composers specifically has really been like pretty important in the Canadian landscape and well beyond. So, yeah, it's great to hear that you're contributing to that wonderful collection of commissions. Um, so, broad question. You've talked a bit about this about your background. So, you've come back to choir. Hurrah! What inspires you as a composer?
So many different things. Originally, I would always try to do my best to do whatever the piece asked for, and to put that in context, I never compose unless I know it's going to be performed. I'm not the kind of person that will sit down and say, I'm inspired today to write music. I will write music for myself. For me, it needs to be part of the collaboration. And inevitably, I would tend to start really, really folding myself to what I thought my collaborators or my clients wanted from me, as opposed to what I could bring to the table. So I'm starting to learn for myself nowadays what actually inspires me, which is really interesting. Because often I would be inspired by other people's ideas, but now I'm trying to tap in what sounds interesting to me. And I really, and these are broad ideas that a lot of people connect to, but anything that has to do with nature, but anything also that has a deeper meaning. If I can find poetry that has great imagery, but also just something that just hits home with some sort of really human experience or connection experience, I love that. I love just having a large sense of drama. I'm a very dramatic person. When you meet me when I speak, I sound very level-headed, but I'm very extreme when it comes to emotions, and I try to keep them in check. But so music is one of the places where I allow myself. So I had somebody recently this week who said, how do you do such large contrasts? And I thought, oh, I didn't realize I did such large contrasts. And
Yes.
I guess it's my drama
Sorry,
self
sweet.
coming out. I love dramatic stuff.
That's great.
Not drama for sake of drama, but I love when I express emotions. I need them to be big. So yeah, if it's something that can allow me to really expand this emotion, then I'm really excited about it. It can be something that's really tender, which I did recently. It can be something really angry, which I did with when a thought of war comes. Things like that. So that really, really inspires me. Or if it's just a good old traditional tune, I also get really excited about that, because I love fiddling. So there's all kinds of things that inspire me. It's hard. I don't know. And also just other art inspires me. So if again, like I said, if there's really good poetry, then that just really spurs it on a lot.
Hmm. That's awesome. I mean, I can so relate to that. I don't think I'm an especially dramatic person, except, or I should say, on the podium, I try to allow my gestures to sort of bring attention to me.
Yeah.
I should be a conduit for the score. So if it's a dramatic moment, then of course there should be a gesture which meets that moment. But I was confessing to Amelia McMahon, our associate
Mm-hmm.
conductor, recently that there's a piece on our program this November by Joel Thompson called "Hold Fast to Dreams," and it's a setting of Langston Hughes text, and it's really powerful. And it's so incredibly written for the piano, and our pianist Lynette Wallstrom is brilliant. And so I know there's going to be a moment in performance where it's just going to be like, it's going to feel really good to sort of match that music with a gesture that is fairly dramatic, but it does, I try to keep it in check because again, I don't do it, try not to do it to draw attention to myself. But yeah, I love hearing when a composer's like, yeah, like these big gestures, when they're called for, certainly, and when they match a person's just like esprit de corps, like it's really powerful. Um, I'll also say I was just speaking with Tawny Olson because we're performing her work called "That's One Small Step" on this same program. So I just had the opportunity to interview her, and she said, "Well, I start when someone says, 'Hey, will you write me a piece?' That's the first thing." And she, like so many composers, she's really text oriented. And so she was, yeah, it was great to just sort of enter into that process. So, more about the process here. Do you start at the piano? You're a violinist, a fiddle player. Like, is that something that you bring in to sort of develop melodic and sort of rhythmic and sort of motivic material? Is it text first, like pretty strongly, or are there other ways that these musical motives emerge?
I try my best to write for the instrument first that is being composed for. So, sure, I don't sing bass. I can almost sing tenor. You might hear today my voice is a little lower, so I could reach. I surprised myself to yesterday. I could reach like the low C, so I could sing my not loud, but I could. So I could sing my tenor line just to get that there. Can't do bass, so I try to sing through everything. I will always sing first. I will sit at the piano when I need to start developing harmonic ideas and where it's not so much. Uh, multi polyphonic, but more like figuring out the harmonies. Often what I'll do when I say polyphonic. So if it's melody first, wow, there are so many ways to do this. I'm getting into details before I even say what are the different ways. Okay, so melody first will happen with the text. For choir, text is really important for me, and if I want to start melody first, it has to be from the text. Absolutely, because the text informs you of so many things. The structure, obviously, but also the melodic contour and the rhythmic shape of the melody comes
Yeah.
from the text. There are multiple possibilities and ways to treat it, but it's always informed from the text. It's really hard to write a melody and then try to force words onto it.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. So sometimes what I'll do is I will go for a nice long walk, and I'm going to try to memorize the text, memorize
Hmm.
the poetry. I'll just walk, glance at my phone, look at the picture of the picture of the poetry book from which came the poem. I have so many pictures of those. I have like folders full of like poem pictures in my phone. Yeah, I'll just try to memorize it as I take one or two long walks throughout the week until it's part of my. It's in there. Inevitably, I'll misremember a line. And then I'll try to, I have this great melody for the words here. This is going to sound great. Come back to the piano, but go to transcribe. It's the wrong words, and then the
Right.
rhythm
Oh
doesn't work, and the shape doesn't work, and I'm really upset because it sounded so good. So that's the danger. Instead of working with it right there, I work away from the paper. I walk and I try to generate ideas while walking. I'm a fairly anxious person, and apparently there's this thing where like when you go walk, the fact that your eyes have to like focus on different things while you walk calms your brain down, kind of looking for threat outside of your body, and so it leaves your brain happy so it can think of things that are good, like
yeah.
creating things. Anyway, so that's part of my process. Then I start going down the piano when I need textures or harmony, and it goes from there. I mean, there's so much more to it, but that would be a starting point. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And with a piece like La Fille Matelo,
Mm.
there's obviously this whole like the whole feeling of like the dance, the whole feeling of like the just the epic quality of the poetry itself, which, as you hinted at, I mean, it creates the architecture of the piece. Let's talk about this piece a bit. So, um, Jeff Jodrey invited you to compose a piece that would sort of be built around a traditional Acadian sort of theme with sort of musical a musical language that would match that. But then you beautifully craft these reels that are sung, and so yeah, let's start with the story. How did you choose the story, and what happens in this tale?
Yeah. So when Jeff asked me to find something find something that's Acadian, I have access to a few poetry books from Acadian authors, just because my mother was an Acadian, so is my dad. Mom was a singer-songwriter, so she would, of course, collect poetry books for herself to inspire herself. But two of the things she had is these two. These are not Acadian. These are, I think, most of this. These are collections of songs that this person called Marius Barbeau. He would go around the province of Quebec, like many stories of him on his bike going from community to community just to do field recordings of these old people, like the older generation, and what they remembered, and would transcribe everything. So eventually I just realized, well, if I want to do something traditional, I can't really go. I could go with contemporary poems, but it's a very different feel. So if we want to
Mm.
go with more traditional stuff, I should probably go to the older texts. And so I made sure that I looked through this. It's a fantastic book. I don't know how clear the images can be. Let me know if you
Yep.
can see anything.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
Is
it's a
that
couple.
Marius Barbo with someone?
Oh, I didn't even know there was a picture. I'm sorry. I meant to show
Oh, sorry. There
music.
you go.
Oh,
There
I
you
just
go.
picked a random page. Of course, I had to be
Yeah, yeah,
pictures. Anyway, it probably was him with someone.
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
sure. He. So a lot of this, it's all his handwritten music to all the music in there. It's amazing. So what I did is I just looked at the topics. They're categorized and styles and everything, and I tried to find a piece where I did not know the melody because if it's a traditional song, I can take the text and reset it to new music.
Right.
I don't know if we have a furry. Yeah, we have a furry guest. Hey, buddy, he's gonna come. Hopefully, he won't jump on the camera. We will see. So I had bookmarked a bunch of them, a bunch of different styles, and then I checked in with Jeff to see what he would prefer style wise. And this one is actually called Chantons pour y passer le temps,
Mhm.
which is part of the line of the first verse. So the idea, this is a song where we're saying, and it does have a epic feel to it. Um, we open by saying, let's sing together to spend some pleasant time together, and then there's this young lady that dresses herself up as a sailor and boards a ship, and she goes to be part of this crew. That's the intro, and then we get into the actual story. So there's this gal who, her fiance, her lover, has to go and probably has to go to war or something like that on his ship. And he tells her, I gotta go to war. See you later. And then she, in her mind, goes, not cool with that. And then she dresses as a sailor and boards the ship as a sailor. And there's a lot of this play where then the captain doesn't quite recognize her, but then he kind of sees a lot of resemblance. So there's like this flirty moment in the middle where the tenors get to express their love without saying they love, but express, young sailor, you look so much and sound so much like my dear love, Isabeau. And then she, of course, has to go into a huff and say, "Oh, how dare you? I'm not, I'm not a lady. I mean, I'm not a lady." And it's adorable. At the end, they spend 7 years on that ship, and finally, when they get off the mission, she admits it was her, and so the goal at the end is, all right, well, let's take all the gold that the king gave us for this job and let's get married, shall we? So that's in a nutshell, that's what happens.
It's like it has a
Yeah,
parallel in sort of the world of Gilbert and Sullivan, in that
yeah,
kind of yeah, that sort of like
definitely.
there's definitely a comedic element to that, and yeah, that wonderful kind of um,
And I think
playful quality.
this has got to be the only piece where I got to have a modicum of comedy in it.
Huh.
And I really enjoyed, and I think that was my favorite verse to write was that one. It's so
Yeah,
fun. Yeah. It even shows here who was the lady that sang it. That's really cool.
it's great. And that's
Anyway,
called Le Rossignol y chante.
so yeah, one of the books is called Le
Question.
Rossignol y chante, and then there's a second one which is called En roulant ma boule, and these are two very well-known pieces. So I guess he did at least 2 volumes. He probably did way more, but those are the ones I have at home.
Yeah,
That's so
cool.
that's where the text comes from. That's what the story is. And
Yeah.
then the mouth reel thing, I cannot remember where the idea came from, but I knew it had to be a cappella, and I didn't want it to be just a wall of text being thrown at the audience. And back then, I was listening to a lot of Charbonnier de l'Enfer and other trad groups here in Quebec, and often what they would do is, what I would do with my friends too, when we would do mini performances, is that you would intersperse with like, all right, let's put a fiddle solo here, and we would do mouth reels between some of the verses also. So it was just kind of natural for me to throw that in. That's just something I already did, and I would hear be done. Let's put it that way.
Ah. Now, what about if some of our the people watching this video
Yeah.
don't know what you mean by mouth reel?
Oh yeah, that would help.
Do you have an example you could share with us?
Right. So what a mouth reel is, and I'm sure anybody who's from the East Coast has definitely know, and a lot of French Canadians will know it too. But this is a Celtic tradition, so even the Irish do it, the Scottish do it. Even the English do it to a certain degree, and it's basically you take an instrumental jig or reel, one of those tried tunes that you would normally hear a fiddler play or whatnot, and you're at a dance party, and you're at a dance party where there's no recording equipment that exists because it's the 1600s, and your instrumentalists are tired and they need a break. So somebody steps in and it could evenly be the instrumentalist, but they're just tired of playing. And so instead of fiddling the next tune, they sing it. But they sing it without text, so to create the feeling of different rhythm and different accents and everything, there are different syllables that you slap onto, depending where you're in the phrase, that then represents those syllables. It's a little bit like jazz scat. So when you hear a jazz singer kind of do an improv bit that doesn't have words, it's the same idea. It's just every style has its own kind of collection of syllables you can use, and also over time it changes. So what I'll do here, I'll give you two examples. I'll give you an example of an older recording that was a field recording, I think from the 1950s, and pardon the cat meowing in the back. So I'll just let that roll a bit, and you'll hear how the syllables are very muffled. So it's very mou, as we would say in French. And then over time, the group I was talking about, the Charbonniers de l'Enfer, because they were so good, they would also go around like Marius Barbeau and do research and do field recordings and learn as much music as they could in the region and in the province. A lot of people turned to them as to how they performed it, and they're clearer with their syllables, and they're the ones that influenced me the most as to how to use this, like me and then my colleagues too, and my friends when I would do trad music. So here's an example. Il saute la tête à l'eau, c'est le lundi, le mardi, joue de mai. Il saute la tête. Ensuite, il bat des ailes au guet, ensuite, il bat des ailes. Gives you an idea. And I can see you're nodding because you're probably recognizing the syllables a little more that
Exactly, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll use a lot at the beginning of a phrase. You'll use a T for your consonants for a little more accents. The other ones are going to be D's and L's, the softer consonants to kind of make the things go, make the faster rhythms go through. So when you have for 16th notes, for example, you'll say tiddle lady, or tiddle lady. So T D L D would be your consonants, tiddle lady. Just because it's easier to go faster with that. For example, there's a bunch, and I kind of absorbed a bunch of it, and I don't master it, but it's fairly close, I think. It's performable anyway.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, there's a lot of just like there's nasality in it, and there's wonderful like complex sort of qualities of sound too, because there's a lot of like closing to M's and N's and kind of like there's a lot of that kind of thing. So there's a percussive quality, obviously, and there's also this like wonderful kind of room for a forward placement or kind of a nasality in the sound. And when a whole choir is doing that, it sort of, I mean, we certainly want to emulate these traditional kind of approaches, but there's also just something that's like, I think, kind of magnified.
Yeah.
When 28 singers are doing that as well. So that's great. It's so wonderful the way you've constructed this. So you have, as you said, it's sort of broken up the story a little bit with these recurring reels, and that's sort of tradition. That's like a format that fits the poetry, but also is a standard kind of traditional uh, format as well, a formula that kind of works in that style. Um, so you'd say that the sort of the sounds are an imitation then of like a fiddling, and are there other kind of like instrumental sounds that are being evoked, like any specific kind of percussive sounds that are being imitated?
So you were hearing me. I don't know if you could hear in both those recordings, but there's what we call pot de rythmie, which literally translate into foot rhythm. Um, and it's just doing the kind of there's a basic pattern that we tend to stomp out when we're fiddling, and I say we,
Uh,
it's not just us, but French Canadians tend to do it a lot, and then of course there's a lot of exchange between the two sides of the pond nowadays. So of course the Irish and the Scottish are doing it too, and then we actually started doing it. There's someone working on their thesis, their doctoral thesis, trying to confirm this. So it is possible that we were influenced by the big Irish baron,
yeah, I
that
wondered.
has this deep kind of rhythm happening when
Yeah,
the Irish came here, and then the Quebecois were like, "Well, that's a cool rhythm. Well, I don't want to have this drum, but I can do it with stomping." Maybe it came before the Bowron. We don't know. So anyway, someone's working on their thesis on that. It's really cool. So
cool.
definitely that. Definitely the fiddle. Definitely the tin whistle. When it comes to more Irish stuff. But it also originally was that, but then it really evolved from there. So I'm pretty sure that the syllables we use nowadays are more developed than they were back then. Um,
Interesting. Um, We are preparing for our November concert with the Halifax Camerata Singers. The program is called Inhale, the idea being that there are various stories depicted on this program. It's sort of about bold aspirations and sort of big gestures. And so this piece fits, I think, perfectly. It's meant to sort of, also evoke music that sort of takes your breath away. I think that there is a speed, if we can get the French fast enough,
sorry.
there's a speed called for in this piece that I think is a little bit breathless. That sort of
Yeah,
takes the
definitely.
breath away, and so I think it's just perfect. I'm so grateful that you've written this. I'm so grateful this is part of Camerata's repertoire, and though it was new to me, and then we're pairing this with a piece which it'll be a world premiere of a piece by Edward Enman called Blondin about the famous tightrope walker of Niagara Falls, and French. So that the text is in English. It's by a British poet, but the figure that's being depicted is as the Frenchman. So there's an interesting connection there, maybe. But also, it's this idea of like literally being on the precipice. This sort of nutty sort of thing that was so written about and talked about, and there's lots of present day parallels, I guess, with these sorts of daredevil uh, personalities. Um, so I think these pieces go beautifully together, and I am also really I think it's neat that Edward from his time in Montreal. He's just relocated back to Nova Scotia, which we're so excited about. But it's neat that you and Edward have worked together in Montreal. What do you think sort of makes La Fille Matelot a story about bravery?
This is where I have to figure out how bravery is defined for myself, because in my mind, courage and bravery comes in when something scares you, but you do it anyway. And then I look at this text, and there's not even an inkling that this character was afraid or worried or anxious. She just does it. So I'd
Interesting.
say it follows your description of bold actions. She's definitely bold. And gutsy and I'm gonna go on this ship. We can probably guess that there must have been some tense moments if we want to start digging into the story itself, but that's not how it's depicted in the poem. And so it's not depicted like that musically either. It's just pure boldness the whole time too. The only time that is really kind of you have a little bit of a little bit of a worry or a kind of a question mark in the dynamics is on the second last verse where let me find my English translation. So the lass has been 7 years on that ship without being recognized, under the watchful eye of her lover. Under the watchful eye of her lover. So that's the only line that tells you that maybe she had to be on her guard the entire time, and that must have been a little nerve wracking. So that verse is a little more quiet, more like stealth like and whatnot. But yeah, it's neat also then in that case to have pieces like Blondin in there. Is it more self reflective in that one, or do we talk about
It's
his own
more,
challenges?
yeah, it's not from the perspective of the tightrope walker. So I think there's room for
Okay.
like just this sort of like awe and wonder and shock of kind of what, what is happening. But also I think there's this romanticized picture of what this, what this figure was. And somehow it almost is, because we look back, or even I remember, as a kid reading like the Guinness Book of World Records and different sorts of things. You think like, oh, it's so like, isn't it amazing that this human feat? But it's like then you think about it, you're like, this is wild. Like, how many
Yeah.
times did this person almost die? Like,
Yeah.
but you sort of like it sort of becomes like less human. But
Mm-hmm.
then I think because the poetry is really beautiful, it does it holds space for kind of that. Like there's a through line in Edward's writing where you hear the tightrope almost the entire time through, and so and it goes right to the very end. So there's never a moment
Mm.
of sort of wavering, but I think there's still room for kind of like it's a good balance to the boldness of your piece, I think, because there's more kind of just like don't 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 make a move that's too off kilter, or we could be in trouble here. But yeah, I think it's an interesting pairing. I think I love that. I think you're right, boldness rather than bravery or courage or that kind of thing. I think that definitely comes across in your piece. So maybe that's the answer to this next question. But
Oh,
I like to ask composers this question: what would you hope that audiences sort of come away with after listening to this piece?
oh my gosh. Um, I think for me personally, I just love that there's a story, and I know it's in French, but I hope I like that there's a story that can be told through music. I love epic tales. Some of them take like there's a Kalevala or Beowulf that used to be sung. It would take days to sing through it, and I find that tradition so cool. And I want us to be able to keep being able to sing stories to each other as part of our practice of group singing and choral singing and whatnot. So for me, yeah, I just hope that they get that feeling of that sense of fun and that feeling of boldness from the story, that it comes through and that this was a fun romp, may I say.
That's awesome. I love that. The program Inhale will be presented on November 16th. Other pieces on the program include Tawny Olson's That's One Small Step, which depicts the 1969 moon landing. Definitely another crazy idea, a bold, a bold gesture, but also a work by Lily Boulanger, Imo Soleil, uh, beautiful, stark, powerful evocative work. And of course, Edward Enman's Blondin, among many other pieces. And we are so excited to be presenting the music of Marie-Claire Saindon. Marie-Claire, thank you for discussing your music with me today. And for the gift of this song as part of Camerata's repertoire. It's really special, and I hope we are able to do it justice and bring a lot of excitement to that romp as we continue to fine tune all of that. But thank you for the conversation today. It was great to learn more about your process and to hear your voice.
Well, thank you for inviting me and discussing through this. I hope the concert goes great.
Thanks so much.